Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Rutland series. Rutland is the smallest county in the East Midlands and has some 57 parishes to its name. Without further ado, let's get walking around one of them. Welcome back to Rutland, everybody. Now, don't be fooled by the drive-in intro that you're about to see for this episode, because it looks like I'm in the middle of nowhere until the very end, because this place is sited off a major-ish kind of road. You turn off that road and all of a sudden the village just hits you. There's not much village to talk about here. It's a small one, but even so, I think it's pretty lovely. Welcome to Teigh. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to the village of Teigh, a tiny Rutland community right on the Leicestershire border. Teigh is laid out in the shape of a letter E, with 3 roads protruding from one central street, all of which link to Teigh Road, which runs to the east of the settlement. It's made up of a collection of cottages, a church and a few farms. Its population is just 48, and it's often included with that of Market Overton for statistical purposes. The village is mentioned in the Domesday Book as Teigh, although it's had plenty of other spellings throughout the centuries. The origin of the name is unsure, but it's believed to mean a small enclosure or a meeting place. Whatever the case, it's the only Teigh in the country. Small it might be, but Teigh has some crazy bits of history. Take, for example, the 14th century former rector who suffered the indignity of being beheaded in the village street here. How about the fact that it's another of Arthur Mee's proposed thankful villages? That's commemorated with a memorial outside the church. What about the old post office, which once played host to one of the most celebrated writers in UK history? And how about the 16th century Leicestershire explorer that's buried in the churchyard? Yes, tiny Teigh has lots to offer, and the best bit about it all is that it's surrounded by glorious English countryside. Could there be a better place to be on a summer's day? Let's find out. Let's go. We start at the war memorial opposite the church. Theoretically, Teigh doesn't need one of these. Once again, we're in a thankful village, one of a small number of villages nationwide which suffered no loss of life in World War I. That's not to say there were no residents who served. In total, there were 11 men and 2 women from Teigh who did just that, all of whom survived. The church has a memorial which mentions a 12th man, Private William Arthur Haynes, who was killed in France in 1916, but he was only a visitor to Teigh, and the memorial was drawn up during the war. Not far away from that memorial, I found a little wooden notice board, and you can mark Teigh off the Rutland list, folks. 6 down, 51 to go. Here we're looking down the middle of the 3 roads which lead away from the main village street to Teigh Road. The main street is much like the one in Barrow, lined with a few cottages and farmhouses which are mostly built of stone with slate or tiled roofs. And they're pretty. So it's a pretty little place, this, and little being the operative word. Once you get past these houses you can see behind me around a bend, you're then sort of into the middle of nowhere, which is what you saw in the drive-in. And you can use that road to form a loop to come back to the church. So I imagine for the next sort of 10 or 20 minutes, I'm not going to be filming a great deal, just maybe some views across the other side of the road, maybe. Who knows, there could be something out there, but I'm not expecting much. If not, I'll see you at the church. As it turned out, there were some pretty interesting things still to see. As you amble up the road, you pass a former water pump. I thought this, close to Angus Farm, might have been the only one, but alas no, there were two. This one is literally just a few yards further along, and it has a small plaque which tells us it was built over an 18-foot deep stone well and was restored in 2019 by a Mr. and Mrs. Robbins and an N. Bateman. It's next to a house which has an amazing bit of history. According to this plaque on its wall, the famous 18th century Scottish poet Robert Burns once stayed here. That's a fact mentioned in a book called The Villages of Rutland, apparently. As well as that, the building is Teigh's former post office, so it was well worth capturing for two reasons. After this, Main Street does finally come to an end, and we're now on Teigh Road, the long country lane which I drove in on. Okay, so now we're on the road, which will take us down to the southern end of the village and form the loop on the right hand side of the road, obviously, because safety is a priority, and if there's no footpath you should always walk on the right hand side of the road. It's not the law, but it's certainly the safest option. Trust me on that. I grew up in the countryside. Okay, so that was good, wasn't it? About Robert Burns. I had no idea about that. It just goes to show, doesn't it, that even the best planned routes in the world can't necessarily know everything. And I definitely didn't know about that until a couple of minutes ago. Really, really interesting. Let's go and find that church. After rounding the final corner, we're faced with the old rectory, a Grade 2 listed building dating from 1740. This was used for the filming of the 1995 BBC series of Pride and Prejudice, as it served as Hunsford Parsonage. It predates the current church by 42 years. Although Teigh has had a church for centuries, Holy Trinity was rebuilt in 1782 by the architect George Richardson. Only the base of the tower survives from a former 13th century building, with some later 14th century work above. In 1321, Teigh had a notorious rector named Richard de Folville, a ruffian priest who often joined his lawless relations in exploits of robbery and murder. He would meet a sticky end, eventually being beheaded in the village street. The church was open, so in we go. You enter the building via the west tower into a circular lobby, and then on into the nave. In here, there's a most unique feature, the like of which we've never seen before. That would be a fantastic triple pulpit built into the west wall. So the first thing I've noticed about this church is the strange orientation of its pews. Now normally we come into a church and we see the pews all facing towards the altar this way, and you've normally got the pulpit here and the lectern, and then obviously the chancel and the choir stalls and things behind that. But here it's a little bit different. All these face the aisle on both sides, and the pulpit is up here. So it's completely a different orientation. And I love these pews as well, by the way, for another reason, because they're all very old and wooden. You know, they're not modern pews, are they? They look a bit weathered, shall we say. There's a few of them that have seen better days. Probably need a bit of touching up there, actually, that one. But yeah, I like old churches like this, though, because it shows how different they actually can be. They're not all the same. There's the font down there. We just head over to the other side. You can see it's in its own little section within the pews. Again, that's unusual because you normally find the font either at the end of the aisle there or just off to the right, sometimes off to the left. But yeah, that's very unusual, isn't it? Lovely little church, this. I have to admit, it's a one-room job, There's no separate chancel, no aisles obviously, and there's obviously a tower, but other than that, that's really all it is. It's well maintained, it's lovely, it's fantastic. The special section today is about Anthony Jenkinson. Born in Market Harborough, Leicestershire in 1529, Jenkinson was one of the first Englishmen to explore Muscovy, which is what we know today as Russia. Jenkinson was a traveller and explorer on behalf of the Muscovy Company and the English Crown. He met Ivan the Terrible several times during his trips to Russia. He detailed the accounts of his travel through several written works over his life, including personal letters in which he mentions at length Ivan's terrible and atrocious form of rule. Jenkinson would also make several maps of Russia, which were incorporated into Ortelius's famous atlas, Theatrum Orbis Terrarium. His work would establish several overland trade routes through Russia to Persia. He once travelled as far as Bukhara in modern-day Uzbekistan when trying to reach China and India, but found the routes were impassable due to wars and banditry. He died in 1611 and he's buried right here in Teigh's churchyard. With not much more to see in Teigh, I made like the boxers might have done in Thistleton and escaped over the county boundary, driving north into Leicestershire through the villages of Edmonthorpe and Wymondham. I hope you've enjoyed this little run of 5 in Rutland, guys. I'll be back to the county again very soon. See you later. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.